Okay, welcome ladies to another Tuesday night class. We want to thank Mr. and Mrs. Cohen. We missed them when they went to Israel for so long. And right when they come back, they're already hosting. We should have only simcha in the house. Amen. So we did Hadakan Nerot and Hala. We're going to be starting the Hadachot of Pat Yisroel. Food, which is bread or cookies, cake that's baked by a Jew or baked by a goy, what you can have, what you can't have. Now most of these halachot are going to pertain to Sfaradim as opposed to Ashkenazim, but some will be for Ashkenazim as well. Now there are 4 questions that I have, and I want to answer them all with one answer. Whenever I have a question on a parasha, on a passage in Torah, I write it down and I come back to it to see if I can fit it somewhere. So I was working on something this week, and I think it's emet, and I wanted to share it with you. It's about these parashot that we had and the parashot that we're going to have as well. Now, the first question is like this. We know Avraham Avinu had a test. Lech lecha me'artzecha. Go from your land. He said, take your family, take your slaves, take your kids, take your cattle, take everything, and go. I'm not telling you where you're going to go, but just keep on moving. Now, there's a different lech lecha also. When God told Avraham, lech, go and slaughter your firstborn son, or your firstborn son from Sarah. We all know that whole story. How he said, which one is it? And she said, well, God said it's Yitzchak. He went to Hada Moriah, he was about to slaughter, and God said, don't slaughter. The Malachim said, don't slaughter. And he instead took a ram, and he slaughtered the ram instead. Now, the Midrash brings in a very interesting question that always bothered me. The question is, which lech lecha, which going is more important? Which test was greater? Now, when you think about it, it seems very simple. It should be Akedat Yitzchak, it should be killing of Yitzchak. So, the Midrash says Levi had a question. Levi had a question. Which one is more? And he goes through the different options, and he says, okay, it comes out that slaughtering of Yitzchak was more important, and that was a harder sin. That was a harder test for him. Now, my question is, what was the Havamina? What was the question in the first place to even think that going from your land is going to be harder than killing Yitzchak? Right? That's question number 1. Question number 2, in Parashat Beshalach, we know the Jews were standing by the Yam Suf, they were standing by the sea, and they didn't know what to do. The Egyptians were coming behind them, they were about to get them, the water was in front of them, they were trapped, no way out, no exit. There's a man named Nachshon ben Aminadav. Nachshon ben Aminadav goes, he jumps in the water gets to his feet, to his legs, to his chest, all the way up to his nose, and then the water splits. Now, if we look at the word in the pasuk says hamushim. It says the Jews were armed. Rashi says mizuyanim. They had something. They had weaponry. The Brisker Rav says, what was the weaponry that the Jews had at that moment? The atzamot shel Yosef, the bones of Yosef. Now, we're going to give you a little introduction to what happened. During Makat Choshech, during the time of darkness, the plague of darkness, when all the Jews were going around checking to see where the Egyptians held their money and their valuables, there was one person that was looking for the bones of Yosef. His name was Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu went, he got the bones, and he brought them with him to bury Yosef in Shechem. So the Brisker Rav says that what made the water open? What made it split? And he says what made it split was Yosef's bones. Question number 2, was it Nachshon ben Aminadav who jumped in, or was it Yosef? Which one was it? How was it both? The third question is, everyone always speaks about how Avraham Avinu did such an amazing thing. He wanted to slaughter his firstborn son, Yitzchak Avinu, the person that was supposed to be the father of all Jews. And he was going to get ridiculed and made fun of and probably killed by all the people who he made convert, who he said, don't kill your sons. And for some reason, nobody talks about Yitzchak Avinu. In very few places, a midrash here or there, they talk about, Yitzchak Avinu, he was 40 years old, he was going to kill himself. They all talk about Avraham Avinu, how great he was. Why? Is it harder? Is it easier to die as opposed to killing? He was willing to give up his whole life. But nobody speaks about that. And the last question, which is actually from this week's parasha. This week's parasha we spoke about last week was Yaakov Avinu meets Rachel. Yaakov sees Rachel, and he says, "Vayaged da'aviv k'achi aviyahu." Tell your father that I'm related to you. And we explained last week that when he said Vayaged, he was actually telling Rachel the simanim. Now, what are the simanim? Yaakov Avinu knew that Laban was a trickster, he was a sneak, he was a cheat, and he knew that he was going to switch Rachel for Leah, Rachel for Leah. So what did he do? He said, I'm going to mess with him now. And I'm going to make sure that he'll never be able to do that. I'm going to tell her all the simanim, the certain signs, so that when it comes to the wedding day, he's gonna try to trick it. She's not going to know the signs. I'm going to say, no, deal's off. This is not the one I'm supposed to marry. So that's what she did. She did an amazing thing. We explained last week what were the signs. Chala, Nida, and Hadakat Hanir. He taught her about those three halachot. How do we know that? The Arizal brings down that those words that I said before, Ki achi aviyahu, Vayiged Yaakov, Yaakov Rachel Ki achi aviyahu, those are the gematria, the numerical value of Chala, Nida, and Hadakat Hanir. So that's what he told her. Now, what's this question? The question is from a midrash. I'm just going to read it from the midrash itself. It's always good to read from the holy books. It says it was at the time when the Beit HaMikdash was being destroyed. The Jews were dying, they were going into exile, and it was a ruckus. Nobody knew what to do. And while this was happening on this world, up in Shamayim in heaven, there was a whole debate. Moshe Rabbeinu went up to God, Yirmiyahu Hanavi went up to God, and they said, you can't do this. What about all the children? And it gets involved with each one going to Hashem and saying, you should take my children out of exile because of what I did. Now, Miyad patach Abraham lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Abraham tells Hashem, he says, Ribono shel olam. He says, after 100 years I had a child, I had a son. He was 37, and I was going to bring him up for a korban. He says, I was going to be like an achzar, I was going to be a cruel person and kill my son. I wasn't going to have any mercy on him. But I did it. I was going to do it until you stopped me. Make the children of Israel come out of exile in the merit of what I did. Of me wanting to slaughter my son, listening to you. And God says, no, it's not good enough. Then Yitzchak comes. Yitzchak says, God, I was 37 years old. I didn't want to do it, but I was going to do it for you. Let the Jews come back to their land, take them out of exile, don't let them get destroyed in the merit of me. The merit of me wanting to die al Kiddush Hashem. And God says no. And then he goes to the next one, Yaakov. And he says, Yaakov says, I had a terrible brother Esav. Lavan was my father-in-law. I got tricked so many times. I had to run away from my home, and I did this all for you. Save the kids in my merit. And God says no again. And then it goes to Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu said, who is a better shepherd than me? I took all the Jews out of Egypt. I stood there by your side, by everything. I should be the one. In my merit, save the Jews. And God says, no can do. Until who? At that moment, Rachel Imenu gets up, she jumps up. In front of God, and she says, it's revealed, it's known in front of you, Yaakov loved me very much. He worked for my father 7 years. And when he finished the 7 years, at the time when I was supposed to get married to him, my father switched me for my sister Leah. And it was very hard for me. And what did Yaakov do? Yaakov gave me the simanim, which we just spoke about. He gave me the signs to make sure that nobody could switch me. She said, I had so much mercy on my sister, I didn't want her to get embarrassed for that moment. I gave her the signs. I gave her the signs on the wedding day, and I was willing to forego everything for my sister. For me, let the Jews come out of exile. And God says, you appease me. I'm going to do it for you. Now this always bothered me when I read this midrash. Why? Why her? Avraham Avinu had a really good one. Yitzchak, Yaakov, everyone had such good ones. Why by Rachel all of a sudden he says, you know what? Now I'm going to do it. I'm going to let them come back. Rachel mevakeah baneh. Rachel she cried over her children. Now, to understand the answer, we have to get involved in a little in an introduction. We all know there's a mitzvah of being mekadesh shem shamayim, sanctifying God's name. There's a special mitzvah of always doing things that are right to make sure that God's name is not desecrated. Every moment in a person's life, he has two options. There's only two things you have to think. What I'm going to do right now, is it going to desecrate God's name, or is it going to elevate God's name? And that's how you should choose. If it's elevation, then that's what you should do. If it's desecration, that's what you shouldn't do. Those are the two options, nothing else. Everything else is a prerequisite to get to that stage of what I should do at this moment. Is this going to bring happiness to God? Am I going to make God look good in the world or not? Now we know that I remember when I was in Ish HaTorah, they explained to us that whatever is your greatest pleasure, the opposite of that will be your greatest pain. What's your greatest pleasure? It's kids. Your greatest pain is kids. So now, what's the greatest mitzvah in the world? Being mekadesh shem shamayim, sanctifying God's name. That means, what would be the opposite of that? Right? Not stubbing your toe, not falling off a bridge. It would be desecrating God's name. Now, where do we see this most? In the Rambam. Maimonides writes, he says in Hilchot Teshuvah Perek Aleph, he brings down he brings that from a Gemara Yuma actually. He says there are 4 different atonements that come to a person. If a person does something wrong, he has to do Teshuvah. You have to repent. Now there are times when repentance is not enough and you need Yom Kippur. You need to go through Yom Kippur. And until Yom Kippur, the Teshuvah doesn't work. And there are some times that you need Yisurim, you need to have pain. If you don't have pain, if God doesn't give you a smack here and there, if He doesn't make you go through hard times, right? We all have hard times. Those hard times is to build us up. We need that to take away all these sins, so that we're fresh and we're pure when we come up to Shamayim, that we have everything. And God says you don't have to go anywhere. You're right here because right now you're pure. You need those 3 things. But He brings down something amazing. He says that's not all. He says, "Ul'olam en mitkapel lo kapara gemura ad she'yavo alav yisurim." You always need to have yisurim if you do certain type of averot. And then he says, but everything that I just wrote, Maimonides says, when you weren't mechalel shem shamayim, if you didn't desecrate God's name, but if you did, then the only kapara, the only atonement will be death. So you have to have teshuvah, kippur, yisurin, and then death, right? Because if the greatest thing is mekadesh shem shamayim, then the worst thing is going to be mechalel shem shamayim, and to get out of that, the only atonement is death. Yes.
What's yisurin?
Yisurin is pain. Yisurin is having the trials and hardships in a person's life. Now, I was once, I had the privilege to actually live by Rosh Shmuel Birnbaum for a year. He was at Rosh Yeshiva, Yeshivat Mir. And the first day of Hanukkah, I walked home with him and I asked him a question. I said, I don't want to pray for Mashiach to come. I don't want the Messiah to come. He said, why? He said in Yiddish, Farvas Nish. And I tell him, because when Mashiach comes, there's no more mitzvot, no more avirot, no more nothing, and everything I have now is going to be what I have for eternity, and I don't have enough. So how can I pray every day for Mashiach to come if I don't want him to come? So he says, you don't want him to come. He says, but pray for everyone else, they all want him to come. So I tell him, they also don't want him to come. It's not just me, nobody wants him to come. Because then it's going to be over. It's end game. We have nothing left. So he says, you're right. He says, pray that he should come, because when the world sees who he is, you'll be Mekadesh Shem Shamayim. He said it's enough for you to have the sins and everyone not to want him, for that the world should see who God really is. That's how important being Mekadesh Shem Shamayim is. Now, a person can make a Kiddush Hashem or a Chilul Hashem without even knowing it. How so? There's a famous story that many speakers say over. I believe it was a United flight. There was a United flight that was going domestically, and we know that the Jews always tend to get up after the flight, even when the captain says, "Please, everyone, leave your seatbelts on," until we come to a full stop. And then you have the Jews always getting up because they're always in a rush for some reason, even though you still have to wait online with everyone else. So they're going and they're getting up, and the captain knows what's going on. The captain says, "For all those sitting down, Merry Xmas, and for all those standing up, Happy Hanukkah." See, now that's a Chilul Hashem, and everyone's here, they bow their head down, they sit back down, they're blushing. That's a Chilul Hashem without even knowing it. Because everything, we're judged. I'm going to tell you like this is for really your husbands. If a person, everyone wants smicha. I learn with someone every week. He wants to get smicha. He wants to be a rabbi, get smicha, go to Israel. If you want smicha, just do something wrong. The New York Times will give you smicha right away. It doesn't make any difference if you're modern Orthodox or you're traditional. You could be anything. You turn into a rabbi that moment. Rabbi steals money, right? The guy doesn't look like a rabbi. He never learned a thing in his life. No, but he's a rabbi now. So that's a Chilul Hashem. You do something wrong, and the world looks at you as ultra Orthodox, right? It's always ultra Orthodox. It says it. The Post, the Times, Daily News. It's all the same. Now, where do we see this even more? By the Bechorot. We know by Makat Bechorot, the last plague was that the firstborns die. The firstborns of the Egyptians have to be killed. And we know that something amazing happened. When the firstborns died from the Egyptians, no one else died. Right? No Jewish firstborns died. And the rabbis asked the question. We understand why the Kohanim got the ability to work in the Beit HaMikdash. The Bechorot lost it when they did the Egel HaZahav. They did the golden calf. They lost it. It went to the Kohanim. Right? We know that story? Or should I say it? Mila Hashem Elai? Okay, so what happened with that story was like this. Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Shamayim, to heaven, and the Jews did not know he was coming back, so they basically made another god, whether it was right to do, whether wrong to do, whether they wanted to be a god or just an intermediary, that's not for now. And they went and they had a golden calf, which parenthetically, the woman did not want to give towards this golden calf. It says, the rabbis bring down that the woman had all the jewelry and they wanted to make this big thing, and they wouldn't give it, and they actually ripped it off of their noses and their ears, wherever they had this jewelry, they ripped it off in order to take it. Right? It's not like, because also women like jewelry. Maybe they wanted to keep it. I don't know if that's the real reason, but it's because they didn't want to go and do this to the Egel HaZahav. They didn't want to be part of this. Now, after that, Moshe Rabbeinu comes down and he says, Mila Hashem Alai, whoever is with God, come on this side. And at that moment, all the Kohanim and Levi'im went to that side. Everyone else was on this side, and he says, pick up your arms and now kill your brothers. And they had to make a very big decision. They had to go right now and kill all their friends and their families and their brother-in-laws, whoever it was. Because they were serving a different God, serving an idol. And which they actually learned, they say that if they would have waited a moment, everyone would have been destroyed. It shows you how important every moment is. If they would have said, you know what, let's think about it. Maybe we should make peace, we should do something. Let's have a meeting. Everyone likes to have meetings. Let's have a meeting on a meeting. And then everything would have been destroyed. So instead, they did it the right way, they did it right away. But who had this ability to work in the Beit HaMikdash, to work in the temple before? That was the Bechorot. Now, how did they get this ability? You know? The ability they got was because when all the Egyptians died, the Jews didn't die. That's it. Since the firstborn Jews didn't die and the Egyptian firstborns died, it was a Kiddush Hashem. And everyone saw, wow, look at that. There must be a God. Even without even doing anything, you can make a Kiddush Hashem right away, just by not dying. And they had the ability to go right now and work in the Beit HaMikdash because they didn't die, and the Egyptians said, wow, there must be a God. The God of Abraham and Isaac is the right God. Now let's look at it in the opposite effect, the mirrored effect. We're going to see in 2 parashiot from now, Yosef HaTzadik is in Egypt. He's the king right now. And his brothers come into Egypt and he says, I'm Joseph. Is my father still alive? And they say, yes, he's still alive. And they tell him and they ask him, they say, you know, our father would not want you to hurt us. He wouldn't want you to hurt us. He says, no, this is not from you. The reason why I'm here is not because you sold me. God wanted me to be here for whatever reason. And then, right after Yaakov Avinu dies, the same thing happens. So they thought maybe the reason why they were going to, he saved them, he didn't want to kill them, it's because his father was alive. Now that Jacob died, they asked him again. They said, listen, you know, really, don't worry about it. I'm not going to kill you. This is all from Hashem. So why am I bringing this down? Because in the Gemara, they bring down the Asara Harugim Malchut, the 10 martyrs. There's a story in the Gemara that the 10 biggest rabbis were killed in terrible, terrible ways. One of them, it says the daughter actually asked for this, that he was being burnt alive, one of the big rabbis, and she had his face taken off because he was so beautiful. Rabbi Akiva, which everyone knows, they took metal combs and they ripped off his skin. There's a different rabbi, I think it was Yisroel Kohen Gadol, where it wasn't Rabbi Shimon Kohen, it was a different rabbi, I forgot the name, where they put wet cotton by his heart and they wrapped him in a Sefer Torah. And then they would burn him. They put the wet cotton so that he would last very long before he died. And the Talmidim, the students said, look, what do you see? What's going on? He says, I see all the letters from the Torah going up to heaven. But before this happened, before all these 10 rabbis died, they went up to Shamayim and they sent a shliach. They sent one messenger to go up to heaven and ask God, should we fight them or should we not fight them? And God said, no, don't fight them. Why? Because you are reincarnations of the 10 brothers that sold Yosef HaTzadik. So you have to come up and you have to be killed to take away this atonement, to get atoned, to take away the sin that you did. Now, if he was forgiven or somewhat forgiven, if they were forgiven twice from Yosef HaTzadik, it wasn't you, it was Hashem, then why would they get killed for? What do they have to get killed for? Right? If you do something wrong, the person forgives you, okay, the sin's off. You do teshuvah, the person forgives you, you have no more sin. Why all of a sudden over here you still have a sin? Why did they have to be killed many generations later in such a brutal way, such a cruel way? And the Chidah brings down from a Sefer Charedim the reason why they had to be killed. Because you're right, Yosef HaTzadik forgave them, everything was good, they were brothers again, but there were other people that found out about this. Who were the other people? The Mitzrayim, the Egyptians. They said, hold on a second, who are these people? I thought they were spies. They're not spies, they're brothers. And they found out the whole story. The brothers went, they sold him, and they said, what kind of crazy thing is this? What kind of Jews do this? They sell their brothers? A Chilul Hashem came out. God said, you're right, he forgave you, I don't forgive you. Until you go and you have to go and be killed for this, I'm not going to forgive you until it happens. Because that's what a Chilul Hashem is. For other people finding out about it. The same thing by Makat Choshech. Makat Choshech. All the Jews, as we said, went into the dark places when the Egyptians, they were all stuck in their path. It was a miracle. They didn't have to go to the bathroom. They didn't have to eat. They were all stuck watching as the Jews went around to look at all their stuff to see what they wanted to take after. And it says, after they went to the Egyptians and said, listen, could we have this and that and the other? And they said, where do you see it? Oh, I saw it in the bottom jaw. And they gave it to them. And Rav Shamshin Rafal Hirsch says, why did they give it to them? What for? So, okay, they know where it is. Very nice. Why would you give it to them? And he explains that the Egyptians knew that the Jews could have taken everything, and they didn't. They said, a people like this, who could have stolen and didn't want to steal, they wanted to ask us, they can have it. Because that's what a Kiddush Hashem is. So you see, we have it in many different scenarios of our lives. My wife, she always makes sure whenever, even if you have waiters and people sitting there, she always makes sure to clean up the stuff. You go to any restaurant and we clean the table ourselves. She says, why should they do it? Because they get paid. So they get paid, so you have to act like a batik to them. You have to act nice to them because they get paid. She makes sure to clean it. Rabbi I just heard a story from a rabbi. He says that he has a certain pet peeve that he always takes the carriage from any place he goes. He goes to Winn-Dixie, he takes the carriage, and he always brings it back. So he said one time, he's there 3 a.m. Not one car in the whole place. It was freezing. He walked out. He's like, come on. I don't got to do it now. Nobody's going to know. There's nobody here. He's like, but you know what? I have to practice what I preach. I always make my kids do it. I'm going to do it. He deliberated. 2 minutes later, he takes it. He walks all the way up. He puts it in the thing. And he said, out of the shadows came a man. It was a watchman. And he said, did you just put that carriage back? He said, I did. He said, you know, you Jews are something else. You Jews are something else. Nobody would have known anything. He's like, well, apparently you would have known. But besides him, nobody would have known. There was a boy in Israel, in Eretz Yisroel, there was a bacher. And this boy was in a taxi. And sometimes when you have these boys, they're so spazzed out of their box that they didn't know where they were at that moment. The guy drops them off. He leaves without paying. And now the taxi driver knew. He knew that he paid he didn't pay on purpose. He knew that he totally spazzed out for that moment. And he kept on driving. The boy gets out. He's like, oh my gosh, I forgot to pay. He starts chasing him. Block after block after block. Until he finally meets up with him. And he says, I forgot to pay you. He said, you ran all the way here to pay me? He said, yeah, I owe you money and I have to pay it. He said, you know what, that's beautiful. Not religious taxi driver. He said many years later, this guy got married, he had kids, and he saw there was a certain class on making a Kiddush Hashem. How to make a Kiddush Hashem, and he goes to the class, and the rabbi gets up to speak, and he says, you don't know it, but the person who you make a Kiddush Hashem for, it always changes them. It always changes them. Sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't, but usually you'll see it. So he goes out to the class of the rabbi, he says, you know what, I'm going to tell you my story. He says, I went, the taxi driver, and I ran after him. He's like, I didn't say anything. He's like, Ani ha-nahag. He's like, I was the guy. I was the taxi driver. I'm religious because you ran after me. I saw this is what a religious person does. I want to be part of this. But even in sanctifying God's name, there's two types. And this is how we're going to bring it all back to the answer, to the 4 questions. In sanctifying God's name, there's sanctifying God's name by dying and by living. Now, if I were to ask around, which one would be harder? To live al Kiddush Hashem or to die al Kiddush Hashem? What do you think?
Live.
To live would be harder. Now, Rabbi Ma'oz Raful told me a story once. He said that there was a certain town in Spain during the Inquisition. It wasn't a religious town. And all the people either had to become Christian or they would be killed. They have to convert or die. And the rabbi goes into the synagogue. He takes all the members and all the people. And he said it was a very hard thing to do because these people weren't religious. Okay, I'll be Christian, I'll be Muslim, whatever you want me to be, I just don't want to die. And there were a few of the watchmen, the guards over there, and they said, you have until this candle goes out. Once this candle goes out, it's over. Either they convert or they die. And he said he gave a fiery speech, and at the end they all died. They all died. They all got killed at Kiddush Hashem. They were so inspired by it. And the rabbi said, he says, stupid question. He says, why would they do that? They weren't religious at all. They didn't have anything to lose. Why would they want to just go and die al Kiddush Hashem? And he explained that it's much easier to die al Kiddush Hashem than to live al Kiddush Hashem. They couldn't live. To live and go through all the mitzvot and be the best you can be, to learn the halachot that we need to learn, to get the spiritual connection with God, the ultimate connection that we're all really craving, that everyone really wants. Whenever someone feels like, you know what, I need something more in my life, it's a neshama saying, I need something. It's your soul saying, there's something more in life that I need. How do I get to it? And then we think it's like food. So we go and buy Haagen-Dazs, right? We go to Haagen-Dazs, or we go to see the guitar casino, or we do all these things that we think is really what it is, but it's not what it's about. It's something more. It's something stronger. So this is how it answers the questions. So the first question was Lech Lecha. Why was there a Havamim? Why would I think that Lech Lecha would be the one that is going and bringing my family out to the wilderness, not knowing where I'm going? Why would that be worse than killing your son? That's because killing your son takes a second. You have to take the knife, you gotta kill him, done. But for me to take people, my family, my kids, my servants, my cattle, and make them go all these different places when they're gonna say, what are you doing? Why are we doing this for? This could be a chilul Hashem. For me to go and do that, that's the having. That's why it would be harder. That's why it's harder. And this answers the second question. So according to Rabbi Levi, why was Akedat Yitzchak, why was that Lech Lecha harder? And in essence, the second question, why do we always speak about Abraham Avinu as opposed to Yitzchak, who was going to let himself be killed? That's because Abraham Avinu would have to live with this. I would have to live with the pain of killing my son for the rest of my life. Yitzchak Avinu, it wasn't that hard. Okay, just do it fast, make sure I don't get hurt, just go, I won't feel nothing. But Abraham Avinu, oh, you want to live al Kiddush Hashem? No, that's a different world. That's much harder to do. And that's why we always speak about him. And then we have the third question. Why? What did the Yam Suf open for? Did it open for Yosef? Or did it open for the bones of Yosef, Or did it open for Nachshon ben Aminadav? And the answer is it really opened for both. But which was the stronger one? Not Nachshon ben Aminadav. He was willing to die for it. Yosef was willing to live for it. How so? Yosef ran away from Eshet Potifar. The story goes that he was in the house of Potifar. She liked him, she wanted him, and he had the chance to do the sin right there, and instead he said, you know what, I'm not going to do it, and he ran away. And because of that, he lived 22 years in jail. He lost everything. He could have been killed. He didn't know what was going to happen to him. A person like that who's nas, he ran away from Avera. The Yam Suf, the sea is going to be nas. It's going to run away for the Jewish people. A person who's willing to live al Kiddush Hashem is better than dying al Kiddush Hashem. And now we're up to the last answer. The last answer was Rachel Imenu. How come by Abraham, by Yitzchak, by Yaakov, they all went to God, Moshe? They went to God and said, God, take my kids out of exile. Why? Because of all the things that we did. Until Rachel came and Rachel said, but I gave the simanim. He said, no, you I'm going to listen to. Why you? Because you didn't know you were going to marry Yaakov Avinu. You thought that you were going to give up being the mother of Israel forever. You're done. You're out of it. You're out of the clique. It's going to be Sarah, Rivka, and Leah, and no more Rachel. You were willing to live al Kiddush Hashem, not to embarrass your sister. That's so big that I'm going to bring all the kids back one day. I'm going to take them out of Galut. Good? Chazak very much. There's actually a story not long ago where, don't worry, we're going to get to the halakha soon. There was a story not long ago. It was a person, I believe in Virginia, where he found $90,000 in his desk. Does anyone know that story? In the back of his desk, he bought a desk on Craigslist. He was trying to push it, and it wasn't going. He took it apart. He saw in the back with $90,000 cash, and he called Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky, the big gadol, the big rabbi in America, and he said, what should I do? He said, I could keep it. They would never know. He said, you could keep it. He said, give it back. But when you give it back, make sure everybody knows. Everyone. And that day, he gave it back. He was on the news. I believe he went on like a TV show, and they gave him something for free. He was on a certain TV show so everyone could know. And they asked him, well, why would you give it back? That's crazy. He said, well, you know what? I'm Jewish, and this is what we do. If it's not ours, I'm a rabbi. I got to teach my students. We don't take things that aren't ours. That's a Kiddush Hashem. That's doing something so big that it gets to millions of people. Right? That's on a different scale entirely. There is, it's actually, I put this in parentheses in case I wasn't going to say it, but yesterday, weirdly enough, there's a woman that came into the kollel over here in Hollywood where I learned, and she asked me what's my service, what's my cell phone service. So I told her Verizon. And she says, do you want to switch to T-Mobile? So I said, no, I do not. So she says, why don't you? I said, because I don't pay for my lines. She said, okay, free is always best. And then she tells me, what is this place? I said, it's a rabbinical college. And she tells me, well, my husband is a 7-day Christian. That means he goes with the Old Testament, so he believes in it, and he likes the whole thing. Can he come learn? And then I blamed it. I said, well, you have to ask the head rabbi. Maybe he'll let you. Yeah, maybe he'll let a Christian come learn with us in the kollel. And then when she was leaving, she put out her hand. Right? And there was a couple of people there, and I said, I'm sorry, I don't shake. She said, why don't you shake? I said, well, strictly for my wife. We don't want to, the genders, we don't want them to mix like that. We want it to be special always for the wife. And she says, that is the most amazing thing ever. She said, it was worth it to walk. She said she walked very far. It was worth it to walk all the way here to not get your business with T-Mobile, just so that you can tell me something so special. Now I see what a Jew is really like. I see what you have, that you keep to what you have. And then she said she knows a different Orthodox person that doesn't. That's not here or there. So I said, well, kind of ruined it. I'm going to have to talk to him. Now, there's one more story before we start the halacha. I heard this from Rabbi Joey Haber. Rabbi Joey Haber said that there's a yeshiva in Bayonne, New Jersey. And this yeshiva in Bayonne, New Jersey has very good boys. They learn Torah all day, very strong. And there was a woman in the area, and she said, you know what, everyone always talks about the Jews, how they're so good and they won't do things that they shouldn't do. And needless to say, he said she was a very good-looking woman. She dressed very inappropriate, very promiscuous. And she stood right outside the dorm of the boys' dorm. And she's waiting there, and she said the first boy that walks out, he turns his head, and he doesn't look. And she says, this can't be. She said, I make heads spin. This is not happening. Doesn't make sense. And she starts to follow him. And then he sees she's following, he's running a little faster, and then block after block. A few days later, she goes into the big rabbi, the rabbi of Bayonne, the Bayonne yeshiva, and she says, I want to let you know that I just started my conversion because one of your boys didn't want to look at me in the street. And he said, I don't know what that means. Well, he didn't want, I was dressed not nice, and he would not look at me. He turned his head, and he just kept on walking the other way. And because of that, I'm starting a conversion. And she became Jewish. Now, besides the fact we don't know who this boy is, he could have been a kid that is going to go up to Shamayim, to heaven, and they're going to say, you know, you have grandkids and great-grandkids, all learning Torah, all because of one act of turning your head. Right? We don't see what a little act can do. It can change anything. And that's what it is, making a Kiddush Hashem. Some people ask me, they say, should they wear their hat in the street? Should they wear a kippah? They go to work. I said, if you wear these things, you wouldn't be in places that you shouldn't be. No one goes no one's wearing a black hat with like the Hasidish Bekasha with the gartel and the talis walking into the casino. It just doesn't happen. So if you're going to become that person and dress a certain way and act a certain way, then you're not going to be involved in these things, and then you make a Kiddush Hashem just like that. Because when they find out that you're not that you're Jewish and you're dressed in a different way, you shouldn't be in a different place, then you look bad. You don't look the way you should be looking. Okay, so now, with that introduction, we're going to start the halachot of Pat Yisroel. Now, Pat Yisroel is, as we said before, very interesting halachot. There's not so many that we're going to go into, but it's good to know nonetheless, especially for women who want to go through the halachot of women to see what they could get in their house, what they can't get in their house, what they could buy from the store, what they can't buy from the store. Now, buying, let me say different. If a non-Jew bakes bread for you, that means you have a neighbor right over here. It seems like there's a lot of non-Jews. You have a neighbor, and you know what? How about we go and we have a meal together and he bakes bread for you? It's forbidden to eat that bread. It doesn't make a difference if it's kosher. It doesn't. And not only that, even if you give him the dough and he breaks it, that's even worse. Because he's taking your bread. Why? Because it brings about chatnut, it brings about intermarriage between faiths. And we don't want to have that. We don't have a chatnut between non-Jews and Jews. So we keep that away entirely, and you don't break bread, right? That's the phrase, breaking bread. When you break bread together, that means and that he has a son and she has a daughter, and then they get together, and then who knows what happened. So instead of having that, the rabbi said, you can't have bread at all. Now, they saw that they couldn't do that because you need to eat bread. So they said pat palter is going to be okay. Pat palter means commercially baked, or someone who's selling it. Someone who wants to sell bread. Not that he's making it in his house for you, but he has a store. And that's going to be a dispute between the Ashkenazim and the Sfaradim. Ashkenazim hold that pat palter is going to be okay. And Sfaradim say that you have to do something to make it into Jewish bread. You have to turn on the fire, you have to throw in a twig, you have to stoke the coals, anything that would make it into Jewish bread. How many Ashkenazim are here? Are there many Ashkenazim? That's not so bad.
Thinking as you're talking.
Okay. So you'll listen when it's up to you. Now.
Question.
Yeah.
What about if you have the dough, like it's not cooked, just the dough, and you see.
Great question. So if you have, I just got that question last week from someone. If you buy one of these cookies that are just dough, and you want to bake it, or you have the challah or bread or anything like that what's those little things in the pan that they make? The pull-away breads? Pull-aways. Dinner rolls. So if you have dinner rolls or things like that, once you bake it, it's considered baked by a Jew. So even if they make the dough and they do the whole process, not only that, if you have a Thomas English muffin, where it's very doughy. So you're supposed to put it in, or you have the bagels that you're supposed to put it in the toaster to make it toasty. Just by putting it in, you just made it into Jewish bread, and that'll be fine. So,
actually, I was thinking about the pizza dough.
Same thing.
That they sell.
Yeah, same thing. So
And
you can put on your own toppings. Yes, so in those cases,
bake it yourself. It's not even cooked.
it's already cooked?
It's just a dough.
Right.
A frozen dough.
Right, so if you have frozen dough and you cook it, then it's going to be considered made by a Jew, and that's going to be fine. Good question. Now this only applies to the 5 different grains, which is wheat, barley, oats, spelt, and rye. Not rice bread or corn or things like that. We'll see in next class when we learn about cooking by a non-Jew for a Jew, where these different items are going to come into play. Now, this applies to any non-Jew. It's the first Petrei Teshuvah. Any non-Jew would be the same thing, even if you have a priest who doesn't have kids or can't have kids. Still, it would be forbidden to get bread from them. Or they even bring down regarding Muslims. Muslims have a certain. Muslims come from Abraham Avinu just like us, right? We're both children of Abraham. So they have a certain. You go to the Bedouins and they want to give you things. They want to give you bread and things like that. I say, well, maybe that would be different because they're not doing it because they want to get to know you. They just have so much chesed. They just want to do kindness. But the same thing would apply for there also. Now, regarding Ashkenazim, there are 2 times that Ashkenazim do not eat palter either. And that is Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. Even Ashkenazim are machmir and they are stringent and they do not eat food that's baked by a non-Jew, even commercially. So you'll find those days, instead of having Cheerios, they'll have like Bloomios or whatever it is, some knockoff that they'll eat. There is a different time also that they should be machmir, and that is on Shabbat. On Shabbat, the Mishnah Berurah brings down on the first page, second side, it says that a woman or Jews should be machmir, should be stringent not to eat bread baked by a non-Jew. On Shabbat, it should always be bread baked by a Jew. And that's one of the reasons why we make challah. We make challah because challah is baked by a Jew, and we should always have Tat Yisroel during that time. Okay, so now there's a few heterim which don't apply on Aseret Yemei Teshuvah or on Shabbat per se. Then that is, what if the non-Jewish bread?
Heter is prohibition, right?
Say again?
Heter is prohibition, right?
I'm sorry, no, heter is leniency.
Oh,
Yes, the opposite.
Okay.
There's one heter, I'm sorry, I'll say it in English.
No.
There's one leniency
Okay.
involved in not eating bread from or cookies or cakes from a non-Jew, and that is if it's better. Now, if you have Tony, the non-Jew, who sells out of his bakery and everything's kosher ingredients, and he just makes, his cupcakes are just better. They're just way, way better than anything that you ever tasted, then you can eat it. You'll find that, I remember even when I learned this, my wife used to buy honey wheat pretzels, and they never had Jewish honey wheat pretzels that were good. They never had it, so we used to buy honey wheat pretzels because it was just that much better. You'll find Oreos also. They can't copy Oreos. The Bloomios just don't work. So the Oreos would also be a heter, and it would be okay to do that. Stella D'oro cookies. They don't have any Jewish cookies that can be better than Stella D'oros. And this applies to really anything. If you have Italian bread, right? Jews don't make Italian bread. We can't make it good. So you go to the store and you get that OU Italian bread. It's crispy, it's good, and you can buy it because it's considered better. And we're not strict. We're not stringent on these items when it's better when it's baked by a non-Jew.
Does that apply to Chalav Yisrael? Because there's nothing better than Haagen-Dazs.
So Chalav Yisrael, we're gonna. Yes, that's true. Klein's.
Klein's doesn't even.
Well, wait a minute. If it's
Two
not
classes from
considered-
now. 2 classes.
If it's not considered Jewish, how did it acquire the picture of the OU? Isn't there someone who's like a mashgiach observing and a Jew lighting the oven there?
Yes, so I'll explain it to you. For Ashkenazim, you don't have to light an oven. You don't have to do anything. And since they're the majority, and we're just random people who try to make a difference in the world, they don't really care about us much. It happens to be all the Jewish companies always do it. They always make a Pat Yisrael and Bishu Yisrael. They do everything for us. So if you get Rokeach or Pashkis or all those things, they'll always do it. But the non-Jewish companies and the Ashkenazim, so they're not machmer on it. You'll find a lot of Sfaradim in general. If you want, you could ask after specifics. But you'll find a lot of Sfaradim that also take a lenient stance on this because maybe you're in America and it's much easier and
Is there a leniency if it's hard to find?
If it's hard to find, there is a leniency. We're going to get to it at the end, but I'll tell it to you now. The leniency you're not going to like. But if you're on the road and you can't find bread, you have to drive up to 72 minutes to get kosher bread. So you'll always find it if you're here. You have to drive to Miami to
Not
get
kosher.
the
Yisrael.
Pat Yisrael bread. If you're on the road, you have to go backwards even 18 minutes to get it. If you're in the house, then 18 minutes around you to get Pat Yisrael. But for the most part, it won't be such an issue. It won't be such an issue because everything that we have is going to either be better baked by the non-Jews, or we're going to have the regular stuff. Like a lot of people, I got the question regarding, I don't know if they have anymore, Wonder Bread. They have Wonder Bread still?
It's still there.
People feel like it's a cloud, like you're eating a cloud, and they love Wonder Bread, and you can't find any regular Pat Yisrael that's just Wonder Bread. Okay, so then you could have the Wonder Bread. But
I don't think it's kosher anymore.
they took off the hefsher. Okay, better. Good, now we don't have that issue. But yeah, you have to drive up to a certain amount to get the Pat Yisrael. In Florida, it shouldn't be a problem, but if you go to like a place like Oklahoma or like Alabama where there's nothing over there, so then you're gonna have to rely on the regular OU bread, which is fine, which works. If you have something that's rov, that means more. Let's say you have a couple of breadcrumbs that is pat palter, you have breadcrumbs from a non-Jew, and it's inside an item. What would be something that would be a good example? I know they put flour in Twizzlers. The rabbis bring down a case called kutach, where it's this fish type of cheese dish, and they would put some breadcrumbs on top. Since they say since most of it is not going to be a mizanot or a hamotzi, and you don't make the beracha on it, then it would be okay. This would apply very much actually to, let's say a cheesecake. Let's say a cheesecake with a very thin bottom, that it's really just to hold the cheese. So in that case, you would make a shehakol. That the rabbis say doesn't have to be Pat Yisrael because that bottom is tafel. It's subservient. It's going on the cheese. The same thing could apply if you get one of these cookie ice creams. You have cookie ice creams, and inside the ice cream you have all these little pieces of cookies. So if the cookies are very big, then you might have to make a beracha. But if they're just like the little crunchy things all around, then even though it's not Pat Yisrael, still you would be able to eat it. And you would make a shackle if it's that small. Now this is going to apply to a lot of different foods that we eat. For example, pizza. Pizza is going to be considered pat, and preferably it should be made by a Jew. You'll find in all these restaurants here, they always turn on the fire anyways. They'll always turn on the fire because that's what the hashgachot want. But commercially, a lot of times they're lenient in the matter. But over here you go, or a B&KM, even for Ashkenazim, they'll put on the fire, so that wouldn't be a problem. Now, if you have pancakes or waffles, what does that get involved in? Or donuts, or any of these different types of things. So if it's baked, then it's considered pat, it's considered bread, and it would have to be pat Yisrael. But if it's fried, then it's a different halacha. And that we're going to learn next week. It's called Bishul Yisrael. It's considered cooked as opposed to baked. And that, even the Ashkenazim are stringent, and they hold that you have to at least turn on the fire, and then it causes more issues, which we'll talk about next week. If you have a pancake that flows, it's wet, and you put it in, if it turns into like a little baked waffle or a pancake, then it's going to be considered pat, it's going to be considered bread, and it has the halachot, the laws of pat Yisrael. But if it's like a crepe where you just pour it and it goes around to wherever it goes, the halacha is different. It's not considered pat anymore, and then it's bishul, it's considered cooked, because you put a little bit of oil or whatever you put on it, and it turns into a different mold. It goes wherever it has to go, and that wouldn't have the problem of pat Yisrael, but it would have a problem with bishul Yisrael, of cooking made by a non-Jew. Yes.
So pat Yisrael is also mezonot?
Yes, cookies, cakes, bread, anything.
Not only matzi.
Huh?
Not only matzi.
No, but anything. Yeah, if you have cupcakes, if you have anything that's a mizonot, basically.
Flour, anything is flour.
But not rice. Rice
Anything
wouldn't
with
be.
flour.
Making sure.
Yeah, but it's not flour, because Twizzlers have flour. There's a lot of things that have flour in it, but that wouldn't be a problem. It has to be made into an item. I'll say better. It has to be an item that if you eat enough of it, you'll have to do Birkat Hamazon. You'll have to bench. If you eat enough of something, you'll have to bench. All those things need to be pat Yisrael, because they have the din of pat, they have the din of bread.
I have two questions for you.
Okay.
So I've heard different brachot are supposed to be said for pizza. I've been advised that you say mezonot for it, and if you have two pieces, then it becomes hamoitzi, and then I've also been advised that it's hamoitzi.
So totally not
That's
on
the
topic.
first question.
So you went off topic, but
Well, it's like bread, and whether or not it's considered because of rising, I don't know.
so we'll answer it after.
Okay, the second
yeah.
part was because you mentioned the pancakes and the waffles, so if it's like a crepe, then it's not considered pat, but if it rises, like biscuit rises, then it would be considered pat?
So if it turns into if it doesn't just flow anywhere and it turns into a mold or into whatever you're making it, like if you have the thick pancakes where you just plop it down and then it turns into a pancake, that's pat.
Okay, so it's not like it spreads and then rises, it's
Correct.
just like plop, like
Right.
biscuit, okay.
Right. Exactly. Right, and we said the three things that you have to do to take it out of that issue entirely. Okay, here. So now the last thing on this is going to be regarding Chash Eva. Now this is a very interesting halacha. The Shulchan Aruch brings down what happens, and this happens a lot of times by people who turn religious and their family's still not religious, and then they come back and be like, no, I can't eat that bread. And then they say, well, you're better than me. Yeah, you're better. You ate this all your life, all of a sudden now you're a king, you think you could eat what you want? So in cases of Eva, where you're going to cause fight or hate, or you're going to make a lack of Kiddush Hashem, you're going to make a Chilul Hashem to show that this is what the Orthodox or the religious or the people who want to be strong in God, this is what they do. In those cases, you're actually allowed to eat it. You can eat it so that there shouldn't be any Eva. This is by Sfaradim. Again, by Ashkenazim, they're allowed to do it anyways. But by Sfaradim, best is not to do it, but if it's going to cause fights, then of course you would be able to do it. Now we said that the question that you asked regarding going 18 minutes out of the way, 72 minutes going straight, 18 minutes out of the way, or when you're home. And we'll conclude with this last halacha, that let's say there is no pat Yisrael in the city. If there's no pat Yisrael in the city, you're allowed to eat pat palter. You can eat bread from Tony's bakery, and there's going to be no problem with that. But what happens if they get that shipment in, and you still have Tony's bread? So the rabbis bring down, the Shulchan Aruch says that you have to eat what you have. You have to eat the pat Yisrael, the kosher bread, and then when there's no more again, then you could go back to the other one. You can't, even if you bought it, you can't actually eat it if you have regular bread baked by a Jew. Okay, Be'ezrat Hashem, next week we'll start Bishul Yisrael. We'll talk about the different items that we need to worry about putting it on the fire, not putting it on the fire. Regarding shawarma, right? Shawarma was always a very, very, very big question. When we learned it, it was very interesting. They put shawarma on top of this middle thing, and then you have the non-Jew who goes and pulls it out, and then he cuts it. So then when he pulls it in, is he the one that's actually cooking it now? Right? So we're going to get involved in all these different examples. Thank you everyone for coming. Baruch Adonai L'olam. Amen v'amen.